Hello, I am Alexia Katsanidou from GESIS Leibniz Institute for the Social Sciences, and I'm also a professor at the University of Cologne.
Hello, I'm Isabel Engeli. I'm professor of public policy at the University of Exeter.
Isabel, both me and you have been working quite a bit on various topics, not only gender, obviously. You from the public policy side, and me from public opinion. So I was wondering, after all these crises, having a topic here at PushBackLash, talking about gender equality and democracy, isn't it a bit too much? Everybody is having a lot of stress because of economic concerns, cost of living, unemployment, and in general making ends meet. And we are adding another topic on gender. Do you think this is even relevant?
I think it is very relevant. I think it's true that we really need to acknowledge that it's really difficult times right now for a lot of people. And cost of living, unemployment, but also all sorts of transformational changes and all sorts of radicalization in discourses. So I think those are really difficult times. On the other hand, gender equality doesn't come unrelated to always happening, because when we think about the cost of living, who is going to get hit the hardest? Women, because women usually have the lowest salary. Who is going to have a lot of troubles with unemployment? Women, because women are more likely to get fired, or at least they are more likely to get fired the first. They are among the first one to be fired. And then if we dig a little bit more, what we know, for instance, is that racialized women, some categories, are even more likely to be less paid than men than white women are. So somehow when we talk about the cost of living, when it's actually difficult to find enough money to buy food for the home, why is that? Also because women are less paid than men. So I think it's a way of seeing it, that somehow gender inequalities or intersectional inequalities are actually fueling issues related to cost of living, issues related to unemployment, because those issues are gendered. They are not gender neutral. They are gendered, and very often they are also more at the intersection of other kind of inequalities.
Recent data I've seen showed that there is a category of individuals, for example, in Germany, that are suffering a lot from poverty, and that is older women, women in retirement age, especially those who have been mothers, who are mothers. And because of their many, many years of taking maternity leave to take care of the kids or having to cut down their working hours in order to cater for the family, they end up with like really low pensions and being almost at the cut line of poverty. So, are we talking really here about a systemic problem?
It is a systemic problem because actually the pension gap is the biggest gap that we see. It's not the gender pay gap, it's the pension gap, because this is the accumulation of inequalities across the life course. And that's we know is that it's not any women, is some specific categories of women who also did not benefit from private pension scheme, for instance. So again, we are looking at women who have been struggling with keeping employment, not because they're not good at what they do, it's because they are among the first one to get fired. It's women who stop working to look after children or to look after the elderly and then go back later to the job market, but it's more difficult to get employed. So that's where we're looking at. And there's also something that I think we need to really think about is in terms of pension, we know that in many different countries, actually women had a lower age for pension than men did. And in some countries, this has been changed or completely equalized. But so women actually carry quite a lot of this burden in terms of unequal pay, but then when the pension gap matter. And for instance, in the UK, we had this change of the pension calculation that actually really hit extremely hard one cohort of women in the UK. And governments, one after the other, has not yet to come with a solution to actually provide some sort of financial support to those women at this age where they actually not a lot of money, not because they didn't do anything, because what they did previously was simply not paid.
Yeah, the unpaid work, basically. So, on the one hand, we have this public policy gap that is leading to a really important pension gap. But if you look at it from the other perspective, the one from public opinion, you see that even in the most progressive countries, there is a big proportion of women who would like to stay home to take care of the kids, who would like to offer this particular um, their time for this. At the same time, there are also men who would like to do it. And the question here is to what extent this kind of things, this type of unpaid work, could be compensated in such a way that it will not result in a pension gap.
I think that's a very good question because I really think that in terms of equality or equality of opportunities, to have the capacity to choose what you want to do with your life, actually, you can also choose to stay home to look after your children or to look after your old mother or to look after somebody else. I think those are kind of choices that we really need to enable and empower for women and for men. So I think there is absolutely nothing wrong for women when they decide that they want actually to take time off from work and to stay at home. It's also really important that somehow at some point we reach a stage where it doesn't matter whether it's a woman or a man, to just use a binary that everybody use. It's just rather somebody who,
Exactly.
a person who will stay home to look after children, but also for all sorts of other reasons that you want to take some time off from the job market. What is there really important is that, as you say, there are mechanisms that are put in place to make sure that this person who does this kind of very important work, the care, is actually not disadvantaged at a later stage in life. But that is not only pension, it's also the capacity to go back to the job market if this person would like to. So it's quite a transversal problem. And I think this is one of the problem of public policy, is that public policy is not very good to reach across a range of problems. Usually policy is sectorial. So there is one sector and you build policy to solve a problem that is constrained in one sector. When we look at the question of caring and the question really of making sure that people are enabled to do the choices they would like to do without suffering of any consequences that could be avoidable, then you really need to have a transversal perspective. So making sure that it's a question of choices that shouldn't be dictated by society or by norms or traditions, but also a question of capacity, financial capacity to do it, but then always thinking about what the next step once the care period is done, whether this person would like to go back to the job market, they should be enabled to do
Yeah,
that.
I have one final question, and that is a question for both of us, really. Gender equality and democracy. Are we talking about an unfinished democracy if both men and women, but also all people, are not equal? What is the impact that has inequality, and especially on the gender dimension, on democracy?
I'm not a political theorist, but if you ask me what democracy is, I would say democracy will be never finished. It's always going to be work in progress because I think there is really a lot of inclusion of all different kind of people. But I think there is always more to do. And there is, of course, equality, but there is also other kind of issues or things to look at and to work on. So I think democracy will never be the work will never be done. I think we are facing a period where there is quite a lot of backlash, or at least some kind of neglect or fatigue with democracy and fatigue with gender equality. But on the other hand, when we just look outside, we don't need to go. You and I, we go out on the street and we see all the problems and we see everything that needs to be fixed. So there is quite a lot of work to do and it will probably never end.
I agree. But at the same time, I'm wondering if basically being on the unequal side of things as a woman or as a person of color or as a member of the LGBTQI community, if you lack the political efficacy, if you have more fear in expressing opinions, voting in a specific way. So I think there is a dimension there where the voices of individuals on the unequal side are not being heard because of systematic problems, because of also of individual fears, and also lack of time, lack of capacity to go vote, to go get organized, to have your interests be heard by politicians and by others who bring about change in the policy side of things. So that is my worry, that when we haven't fixed inequality dimensions like that, then not everybody's voice is being heard in democracy.
No, but I think we also need to remember from where we started. We started from a concept where democracy was not only men, but only a very select number of men selected on criteria that had not very much to do with equality, right? So I think progress has been made. But I think it is true that it's really important that somehow democracy remains the belonging of everybody, and everybody needs to have the possibility to get involved with that concept. But I would also think that voting is not the only thing you can do to walk toward democracy. There is all sorts of different kind of political engagement that you can do, but also social engagement. Because I think sometimes when we talk about democracy these days, we sometimes mean society or a group, a community. And maybe there is also a different way to engage that is also quite important. In terms of voting for parties, I think the vote is a matter of personal decision. And that's something that I really care about, that everybody feels the right to vote for whatever party they would like to. On the other hand, I think the vote is still something very important. If we keep going to the ballot box just to express frustration and anger, what are we going to get back in return? Probably frustration and anger, and then the cycle is never going to stop. So somehow, when I go to the ballot box, or I vote online most of the time, or I used to as a Swiss, and when I do that, I usually try to think, what do I want? But I also try to think, what would be good for my mother? What would be good for my dad? What would be good for my friends? What would be good for people around me or my community? And I think those are kind of important questions when you decide which party do you want to vote on. It's not just, I'm unhappy, I'm going to vote for X or Y party.
Voting with the boot is, I don't think, never a good idea. I think where I think about when I go to vote is, what direction do I would like society to take, and how can I contribute? So which party can contribute towards its direction? And it's never an easy decision. I think voting angry and with the boot, as we say, is much easier decision to make. But the most complicated decision is, which direction would I like this democracy to move on?
All right, Alexia, you've done a lot of work on electoral behavior. And I was thinking, when I think, when you look outside, there's sometimes quite a lot of people who are on the fence. Why should those people feel that they're at their maximum, that somehow they can't do more, nothing is working really well? Why do you think they should care about gender equality issues? Why do you think it's quite interesting if you want really to actually really talk to someone who's like, I don't care about gender equality. I care about getting food on my table, having money enough to put gas in my car. What do you say to these people?
I tell them that basically gender equality is not about gender equality. It's about life. It's about getting food on the table, bringing bread at home. And most of the people, even men or women, they experience the same problems. They experience the frustrations of not being able to find a job. They experience the frustrations of, when they find a job, not being treated properly by the employer. And they experience, for example, the same frustrations when I are in the education system, the health system, and so on. And when you ask them about what are exactly the problems that they're facing, there is always a gender dimension in there. They don't know about it, they don't realize it. But even as a man, if you live in a gender unequal world, you suffer from it because you're forced to be in a specific role, and you can never relax away from this role. In the same way that women suffer because when they're at the fertile age, that they're not able to find a job because people are afraid that they will get pregnant and they would fall out of the work for a period of time caring for the kid. At the same time, men who would like to care for the child, they are not allowed to take paternity leave because the employer does not allow it, or they don't expect that. So they are very reacting in a bad way. So when you actually talk about them, about the specific experience they had, then and talking about not feminist, but specific policies on how to address these things, then they realize that it's not about gender issues in general, that is something very theoretic, but actually something that touches upon their lives, their everyday lives, and the experiences that they have. So that is my perspective when I talk to such people, that it's actually about their their work, their life, their everyday experience.
There is something that we did some years ago, a study about really uh, what men think about gender equality. And we actually did focus groups in the construction sector in the UK. And we really tried first. The first question was actually, do people understand what gender equality is in real, in concrete? So could be in construction sector. It could be things like being able to schedule work hours quite concentrated, or having to go to work on Sunday in the summer to finish building, so on and so forth, or having the possibility to take some time off, not necessarily paternity leave, but compassionate leave. So when you actually have your sickest kid and so your kid is sick and somebody has to stay home. And so we had those conversations with quite a range of very interesting men working in the construction sector. And what we discovered is actually most of them did not know that that was part of a gender equality plan. So they were quite surprised to hear that actually possibility to take sick leave, to look after your child, is something really important for gender equality, because actually it's also very important for men, because men are father. And, and so everybody wants to look after the child when the child is sick. And I think that is something that is really interesting, is this the thing is that somehow, as you say, gender equality is a theory, is a concept. And for some people it becomes a monster that you have to resist. But actually gender equality policies or actions are really improving the life of everybody on the ground. Sometimes it's good to explain. And maybe that's what we haven't done so well, is actually, as you said, is explaining and also listening and say, look, is that something useful for you? Yes. Okay. Do you want something else? Do you want something more? And that was the kind of things that we saw in that research that I found personally fascinating.
So basically, tell them that it's not something to be afraid about or afraid of, but rather something that could help them in their everyday lives.
Yes, because I think gender equality is really equality for all. It's not equality for women, because it's always equality for everybody. So, and I think we can really think about all those kind of things that came with progress regarding gender equality that actually are very good for men as well. And we are talking about paternity leave. It's not coming from nowhere. We had maternity leave. In some countries, it took quite a while to get it. And now we are moving to the second part, to paternity leave. And in some countries have developed a very strong parental leave, where actually the two members of the family, of the couple, can decide who takes a leave at what moment and for how long. And then gender roles do not really exist anymore. At least there is a concrete opportunity to say, gender roles can go to the bin. Let's do what we would like to do.
Exactly. It's about freedom, actually. Gender equality is about freedom as an individual to decide what is best for you and for your partner, regardless of the gender of yourself or of your partner, and basically do what fits best yourself, the couple, and the family.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, not only what gender equality should be about, but also what democracy should be about. Empowering people to do what they do best.
Yeah. And also making sure that we are providing conditions that allow everybody to make their own choices. Because we know that some people, for all sorts of different reasons, actually do not always have the same capacity as other, not because they are not smart or they don't have a lot of desire or will. It's just that for all sorts of reasons, it's a bit more difficult. So I think it's also important not just to make sure that everybody can choose, but that everybody actually is in a situation, in capacity to exert their own decision and decide what they want for their life. And I think that's something that comes with intersectionality, for instance. This lens that make you really think all the time that somehow we have to make sure that equality is for everybody.
Thank you, Isabella. Happy.
For more information on the PushBackLash project, please visit our website at pushbacklash.eu or find us on Instagram. You can also find our latest podcasts and videos on Spotify or on YouTube. This production was funded by Horizon Europe, Grant Agreement Project number 1010-61687.